see Wisty as like the most thoughtful person. They think about puzzles and set puzzles from so many angles, like characteristic series of puzzles with cool twists to no rule sets, completely unhinged new rule sets, artistic grids, messy grids. Everything feels really well thought through, but is also combined with characteristic kind of craziness.
Hi everyone, the question was what do I enjoy about Wisty puzzles? I enjoy how innovative some of the rule sets are, like Shivers, Akari RGB, Clockwork Yageling, etc. And even though they are rules that I wouldn't normally like, I end up liking the puzzles and warming up to those rule sets and waiting for my puzzles. I also enjoy how Wisty go all out for the birthday puzzles and create some of the masterpieces we have now, like Supernatural Sums, totally not biased, and Doppelblock yupan. Also, we see is a kitty.
Not only are Wisteria's puzzles incredibly inventive, from set piece to the series on Akari RGB or Clockwork Yagelin, but I always feel a sense of accomplishment having solved one. Not only because they're often challenging puzzles, but she has a way of setting puzzles that make me feel way smarter than I really am having solved it.
Hello, everyone. Couple minutes late, but we made it. Wisteria made it through the cars and the crashes. I I hesitate to ask this, but how's it going, Wisteria?
I am good. I'm very excited. I'm a bit nervous, especially since time does not seem to be on my side today. But
Right.
I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah, I think we've all been looking forward to this for a while. Wisteria is here because some wonderful people voted her in, our Patreons, which were on the screen, and they will be on the screen later. But if you want to get these other wonderful people who are not in this green bin up in there and then get them interviewed, then either donate and you can vote, or share our videos and our streams so we can get to 1,000 subs, and then we'll interview everyone. All right. We have a special thank you for our newest Patreon supporter right here, Mally Pivo. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly. And Wisteria herself is also one of our supporters. Thank you, Wisteria. Okay, awesome. So let's jump into some warm-up questions. Let's go with a new one. I read this completely wrong. I'm going to tell you first what the actual question is, then I'll tell you what I read it wrong as. If you had to live without one of your five senses, which one would you give up and why? And for some reason in my brain, I read life and one of your five scenes, and I was like, what does that even mean? Who wrote this?
Well, as far as my senses go, I'd go without the sense of smell because I don't have that strong a sense of smell to begin with, and
Yeah.
I don't think I'd want to miss food. I definitely wouldn't want to miss out on music or movies or like puzzles. So like instantly, like I need sight and sound, but the others like I mean strategically I might also just choose taste instead of smell. That way I don't taste what I'm eating and I can eat healthy all the time. But I don't know if I'd be willing to make that sacrifice.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you don't have any taste, can you still, like, I think a lot of healthy things are not great for texture. So can you still feel the
Oh, yeah.
texture? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that works.
I just have nothing but carrots all day.
Carrots are so chewy though, like that's what I'm saying. Like there's different parts to it. Not just the taste buds, you know?
Yeah, but you can have them. You can have like the baby carrots that you refrigerate and eat like not cooked.
True, yeah.
Those,
My
so you
eye
can
is
vary it up.
watering for some reason. Sorry. Okay, I think it's because I moved my spotlight next to where the questions are, and I keep like accidentally looking over at it, and it's making my eye water. What's your favorite type of weather?
Oh, probably like fall weather just in general. Uh, it's definitely not snow. I don't want snow. But I'm not particularly a fan of the summer heat either. So just kind of like that in between. Uh, Sunny days are nice. Rainy days are also nice because rain gives you a good excuse to stay inside. But
True.
sun means you can go for walks and hikes and stuff.
Are you more of a outdoorsy person or an inside person?
Well, see, based on my habits, like I'm inclined to like it, I'm inclined to like say that I'm an indoor person based on my habits, but in terms of like my mood and stuff, like I love being outside, like just like sitting outside and when I'm talking to people or going for walks is it's nice. I like being in the woods though. I don't like being outside in the city too much. I mean, like on occasion, like it's fun to go for a walk and like go places, but
Hmm.
I'm definitely more of my habits kind of keep me indoors, so I'm an
Right.
indoor person in that regard.
Yeah, that makes sense. Uh, whereabouts do you live?
I'm in the capital region of New York. I work in Albany. I live a little bit outside Albany.
Cool. Do you like living in New York?
Yes and no. I've been here my whole life, so I know the pros and cons of it pretty well.
Right.
The W knows better than the W don't in this case.
What do you do for work?
I work at Staples. I'm sort of like a jack of all trades there. I've been there for like 4.5 years now. So like sometimes I'm in one department, sometimes I'm in another department. The most demanding one and also like the busiest is the copy and print center.
Hmm.
So I'm there a lot. But we also actually have a fingerprinting department where we fingerprint people for like state jobs or like TSA pre-check. Like when you like before you go on the airplane, you can
Hmm.
go get a background check done. That way you can go into the fast lane at the airport.
Hmm.
So it's kind of it's a surprising collection of things between like making posters for people or being on cash register or like being a stand-in for the TSA.
Right.
It's kind of weird, but it's fun.
uh, I just got a notification on my phone, which is why I looked down. Uh, we got a donation from. I'm gonna read this right off the screen so I don't read it wrong. Poo. Actually, I'm gonna wait to read that in case it is a pseudo. It is a name of someone who has a pseudonym, and I don't want to dox them. So, if you have donated, please put it in the chat, and then I will read your pseudonym. I just don't want to dox anyone. But thank you for the person who donated on Ko-fi. Uh, do not dox people by accident. Do you have any pets?
No, my dad's allergic, kind of, and also just doesn't like being with pets. But when I was growing up and lived with my mother for a time, we had a dog. So
Hmm.
I am versed enough. We did have chickens at one point, actually. Um, they all died. Chickens die really easily, it turns out.
Hmm. That's good to know, I guess. Very fragile creatures, I guess.
Yeah,
Um, what's your favorite holiday and why? Holiday,
Halloween
holiday. Oh,
because
sorry.
it's
I thought you were confused what I said.
no. You said holiday.
Holla, hollow,
Is
Halloween
Halloween
holiday.
considered a holiday?
Yes, I was confused because it lagged a little bit
And
and you said holla and then it
yeah.
finished with ween and I was like, oh, holiday. I think I cut out or something. But no, I didn't need
No,
to say
yeah.
anything. Continue with
Growing
Halloween.
up, I like made my own like superhero with like a design and a logo and everything. And so I was a superhero. And then once I got into high school, it was a good reason to like cosplay anime characters and just like really shitty like $20 cosplays. My favorite was I was Shiki from the Garden of Sinners movies, or Kara no Kayukai, or however it's pronounced in Japanese.
What's your
Very fun
favorite
character.
anime?
My favorite anime is probably that's a good question. I haven't seen too many, especially not recently. Um, Kill Me Baby is a really good underrated one. And I know my best friend is watching this, and my best friend's also a huge Kill Me Baby fan, so I'd be remiss if I did not mention Kill Me Baby. As far as the anime that's had like the most impact on me, like long term, it would probably be Monster by Naoki Urasawa. But that's kind of cheating because the anime is like practically like frame by frame from the manga. Like it's a very faithful adaptation, and the manga is also really good. So
Cool. I'm not well versed, so I might check those out later, but not well versed currently. If you were to be interviewed on a different topic, what would you choose?
So this is interesting too, because while I wouldn't choose music, I'd almost doubt it. Like if I was actually to be interviewed in the future, it would probably be for music because I produce music. I've been producing music for over 10 years now. And I was a writer for a music blog for a few years. So I'm very like competent and like well versed in pretty much any musical topic. But if I was to just like flat out choose, I'd probably actually like rather be interviewed for like in the future for like writing, because like I've written some plays and there's a book that I want to write someday.
Cool. I can't remember if you did send me the link to your SoundCloud or whatever.
Oh, I can post in chat.
Okay, perfect. That'll work. We should ask the question that is related to music. Microstudy, who just popped into chat, asked, what's something you've learned from composing music that you apply to puzzle setting solving, and vice versa? And we'll use that as a springboard into puzzles.
That's a really, really interesting question. Props to Microstudy for coming up with that. I'd say one of the biggest things that I've learned from making puzzles that I've sort of applied to music is like this idea that not every single like idea I have needs to turn into like a fully finished and released product. Like in puzzles, it's been very natural for me to sort of like come up with like ideas for break-ins or like neat deductions that I want to put in at some point, or like even like a rule set that I find interesting, but I don't necessarily make a full puzzle and finish it and get it tested and put it on LMD. Meanwhile, with music, I'm very sort of like more emotionally attached to like every like 45 seconds of music that I make that never turns into a full song. So It's been helpful for me to sort of like learn to sort of let go of some of my musical ideas and just let what is finished, and just do the hard work in getting things to a finished state and not necessarily throwing the baby out of the bathwater, which is a really weird phrase. Sorry to people who aren't English speakers and don't know that that's a phrase. That is a phrase. It's a very strange phrase. If there was something that from like my music that I've definitely had to learn with regards to puzzle making, I would say that just the idea of like creating things for people who get it rather than just trying to please a mass audience, because with my music, I've very naturally just sort of been drawn to making the kind of music that I like to make and making music for myself in a sense. But even though like in the end, I want other people to listen to it, and I'm making it because I want people to hear it and, to enjoy it or to have it resonate with them in a way. But with puzzles, I think there's a sort of more of a community aspect with puzzles where people have this idea that like puzzles are a bit more objective than they actually are. And it's hard to remember sometimes that there's a big difference between like constructive criticism where someone knows their biases and is like giving you advice on how to make a puzzle better versus like some things that some people just like won't like. Like
Yeah.
some people just won't like set and like irregular Sudoku style deductions. Some people won't be able to click with a yupan puzzle or a J-sums puzzle. And that's okay, and you don't necessarily need to try to cater to those people if that is what you're making.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Do what makes you happy.
Mm-hmm.
Justice for you. Yes, exactly. Took the words out of my mouth. Okay, let's circle back to usually what we start off with, which is the start, which is what is the first puzzle that you ever set?
Well, the first puzzle I ever set and posted on LMD was just like a 159 puzzle with like killer cages that I made in like a day, and like it was mostly just like an evening of a day. It wasn't really a super long or complicated process. It was just like a 2-star puzzle that I was happy with. But like if you actually ask me like what was the first puzzle in any sense that I ever made, like I was making like puzzles for my dad when growing up, like when I was in like elementary school, just like random things on paper, be it like mazes or like algebra puzzles or
Hmm.
like word puzzles. Like I'd make like mini crosswords and stuff. I've always been very creative and like to the max of just like any interest that I find a way to like make stuff as opposed to just, you know, solving or watching or reading.
So how long did it take before you got introduced to this whole variant Sudoku thing before you started making something?
So I had already like watched some like of like Bremster and Zeta Math and Cracking the Cryptic, although mostly like Bremster was how I got into variant Sudoku in terms of the idea of I can actually solve and set this as opposed to just like I can watch someone on YouTube do this
Mhm.
cool thing, because Bremster tackles more approachable puzzles. And it was actually, I distinctly remember there was a puzzle, it was like a Renban German Whispers puzzle that Xeon Risk made that just sort of like kickstarted me. It just like transformed my mind from like, oh, this is like primarily a hobby that I just like watch you stuff on YouTube, to like,
Right.
oh, I'm actually solving this puzzle and understanding these concepts and like growing as a solver. But my first like window into variant Sudoku wasn't actually cracking the cryptic. Wow, I said that totally wrong. But it was actually a book by Thomas Snyder, who I believe is one of the GM Puzzles guys.
Mhm.
He has a Battleship Sudoku book, and I had it when I was in my teens.
Wait, that's like something from before those battleships. Is it the same as the battleship Sudokus that some people have made on LMD?
Oh yeah, this predates them by
Oh,
years
that's
and years.
crazy. I didn't even know that was
Yeah,
like something standard-ish. I don't know if that's
yeah, it's
qualifies it.
literally just a book called Battleship Sudoku by Thomas Snyder. And what it does is first he does like one sort of like variant where like all the ships are already given in the grid and you just have to put in the numbers.
Mhm.
And then there's a section which was my favorite section of the book, which is actually just standard battleship puzzles. They're all 9x9. They all feature like the same assortment of battleships. It's like 1 4 length, 2 3 length, 3 2 length, and 4 1 length. And you just have to fit them in the grid with the outside clues and the inside clues, which is just like standard. It's a pretty standard genre.
Mhm.
But that was like my introduction to both Sudoku and Battleship puzzles were actually at the same time. And I definitely latched onto the Battleship part of it more than the Sudoku part of it, which is I actually I hadn't really made the connection when I was watching Cracking the Cryptic of like, oh, these are the same types of people that are like solving
Right.
these puzzles. Had also like I didn't know who Thomas Snyder was. I just knew it as a book I had as a teen, and then like I made the connection after like being a part of the community for a little while of like, oh, that's like a thing.
Funny. It's always interesting to hear people who've solved variant Sudoku before they encountered this community, and then making that connection between the two.
Yeah.
So describe in a few words. What is your setting process like? I guess maybe how is it different from that first puzzle with the killer 159? Like you just set that
As
in a
time
couple
has gone
hours.
on, my setting process has definitely gotten longer. I spend a lot of time like ruminating on rule sets and like staring at grids, just like drawing things. Um, like it helps me to like write stuff down like physically and like actually like think about implications on paper as opposed to like opening up penpa or opening up f puzzles. But that does lead to the problem of often like breaking puzzles and not understanding why, or not even like having a clean answer of why, because it's just like some bullshit chain. So like I've definitely like I'm grateful that like F puzzles and like the rank solver exist, but for me it definitely, in order to set a puzzle, I have to like distance myself from that and just like think about implications on my own and think about what kinds of deductions I want to put in the puzzle. And then it's definitely a sort of trial and error process of how can I like add clues in. I rarely do like extensive revisions after I finish. So each time I add a step, I want it to be very deliberate in what it does.
Interesting. So, oh, there's too many questions in my head. Uh, I guess I'll go with this one. When it does break, but you have those very deliberate clues, do you still try to work in that same type of deduction back in a different place, or how do you like that kind of seemed like a little bit conflicting, like, oh well, it breaks all the time, but then also these are very deliberate, we don't want to revise them. How do you deal with that?
Well, I'd say it very much depends on what kind of puzzle I'm making.
Right.
Like, if I'm like the other day, I had like a set break in that I thought would be cool, and I tried to make it work, but then it turned out that like because it was using arrows, there was like a bunch of like weird arrow chains that just like
Hmm.
forced a ton of digits, and there was no like clean way to see it. So I just scrapped the whole puzzle because there's already 20 arrow Sudoku set puzzles out there. But like with set piece, when stuff broke, I deliberately went back and I found like a grid that I wanted and then tried to build clues around that grid in a way where I knew it wouldn't break.
Right.
Um, and it was the same thing with like the puzzle I made for FJam for this past Secret Satan. I was literally I set that whole puzzle on paper. Like I just didn't want to deal with like I ported it into Penpa and once I was like done with it, but I wanted to have like a grid and I actually was like print out like different grids with like gray digits. That way I could like write in pencil on them and erase stuff and like change stuff and figure out what I could change and what I couldn't change without sort of like breaking the puzzle or making it so that I had to add a clue that ruined an earlier step. So it very much depends on the type of puzzle and what my ambitions are for it. So I'd say with like my puzzles that do end up seeing the light of day, I usually sort of planned it in a sense. If it did start breaking, I not necessarily had a finished grid that I 100% stuck to, but like I figured out something that worked first and then added clues based on what I could change from that.
Okay, interesting. So
It's a habit I think I picked up from
Yeah.
setting classics, because with
Hmm.
classics you kind of have to do that to some extent.
Right. How many puzzles don't see the day of, or the light of day, the day of light?
I'd say that LMD has like a solid like 60 to 70% of the puzzles I've made that reached a finished state, and then the other 30 that reach a finished state just kind of float around Discord and will probably be on LMD at some point, but probably later rather than sooner, just because they're like things that I don't have like as a priority of like, oh, I'm 100% sure I want to release this kind of thing. In terms of like puzzles that I start that don't finish, a lot of times it's pretty quickly that it's apparent that it's like, oh, this is a puzzle that I'm probably not going to finish. Like, I had this cool idea to, I was solving Mixo's Neuromaze puzzles, and I thought, what if instead of having a Neuromaze puzzle, you do like a logic puzzle type puzzle where like it's just like a bunch of like words and statements, and you have to piece together information from the statements. But then the statements are all about like different cells on the Neuromaze. So it's like a sort of like abstracted Neuromaze where it's like, you know, A, B, and C, and like B is on the path from A to C, but B isn't on the path from A to D. And then you're like given statements like that, and statements about like, oh, you know, the path from F to G has 2 letters in between it,
Oh,
but only 2 letters, and neither of them are H, and that kind of thing. But I just couldn't get enough like interesting ideas out of that. Like it was like a cool idea to set, but I couldn't find any way to make it an interesting solve, so I just
Right.
tossed it pretty quickly.
Yeah. That is a very interesting idea, but I can see how, especially with the kind of logical statements, like Einstein puzzles are not very fun to solve because they always solve in the exact same way,
Yeah.
sort of thing. Dubia asked an interesting question. If you could be any puzzle genre or constraint, which would you choose and why? I'm not
I
sure what
would
it
be
means to
Clockwork
be.
Yagellin.
Okay. What does it mean
And
to be Clockwork Yagellin?
I cannot tell you. I can't tell you why or what that means, but when I saw on Discord that Dubia had asked that question, and that was the answer that popped into my head. Like, oh, it'd be cool to be like a loop that goes around gears. It just seems like a fun life to have. Just be a little guy, just sort of like wandering around, making gears move,
That is wonderful, actually.
placing shaded blocks next to you.
I suppose related to that, Isaiah asks, where did the idea for Clockwork Yagellin come from?
I'd been solving some directed loop puzzles, cough cough, castle in the sky, cough cough, and I just I really like directional loop puzzles, and I really like the logic that comes around them, but I didn't know what to add to them. So I thought about what I could do that was sort of like adjacent to that. And the idea for like inside outside just came from like the fact that like in the Castle Wall Delta puzzles, and to a lesser extent the Castle in the Sky puzzle, it requires you to think about whether things are inside or outside the loop. And I realized that that was a cool idea for Yagellin, and I was mainly just thinking about the rule set and like its implications. like I was just sort of like thinking about them in my head. And then last minute, someone dropped out of Secret Satan, and I have become the de facto sort of stand-in for who volunteers for tribute when someone needs to set a Secret Satan puzzle fast. So I thought about what kind of puzzle can I make in a day or two, because at that point I literally only had a day or two to make this puzzle. And I was like, oh, well, I might as well put to use this rule set that I've been thinking about anyway, rather than trying to come up with something completely from scratch. And so I did it in a way that my victim would enjoy. And that was that. But because I had only set the puzzle in a day or two, I was happy with it as a Secret Satan gift, but I wasn't happy with it in terms of like, oh, I'd publish this to LMD. So I decided to make it a series of puzzles instead, because I had some experience doing that already, and it's become something that I really enjoy in terms of trying to craft a set of puzzles that actually introduce concepts and get people to think about things in the right way. That way, rather than just like tossing a 5-star into the wild and then having only people who like 5 stars solve it. Because that's not the way, like I have solved a lot of hard puzzles at this point, but I didn't get there by just being a really good solver who solves hard puzzles. I got there because I've sort of gotten to an understanding of like puzzle language, and like gotten to know how to look for deductions and become a stronger solver. And I feel like some guidance along the way of like having 2 and 3 star puzzles in a certain genre is definitely going to help you get there.
Yeah, that's a great point. I suppose speaking of Secret Satan, we're just leading from one question to another. Pietano asked, what motivates you to set 2 Secret Satan puzzles a year? Is it mostly sadism or masochism?
I would say it is neither sadism nor masochism. I would say, if anything, it's guilt. I feel bad for the people who get like last minute gifts for Secret Santas or Secret Satans or whatever, and just like being able to, you know, do my part in making the community a little bit better, and like being an active participant in that process means instead of feeling bad for someone, I can feel happy for them and happy for myself that I contributed. In general, I have like a weird guilt complex around puzzles a lot of times, because since I am drawn to these really hard puzzles, there's a lot of puzzles that I've started and haven't finished solving. And I feel bad about that, because I feel like the creators deserve more love than they get a lot of times. Especially like when you see an unrated puzzle on LMD that has like 8 or 9 solves, and you're just like, oh, I could be that 10th solve, and then it turns out that it's really hard. It's like, oh.
And then you finally get the 10th solve and it doesn't get rated.
Yeah.
Feels bad, man.
Of course. But yeah, I'd say it's definitely not sadism or masochism, because I actually try really hard with my Secret Satan puzzles to make them clean. Like, I have what I deem like in my head as like 4-star deductions, and I try to limit myself to using 4-star deductions, because a 5-star deduction for the person who sets a puzzle is going to be a 6-star deduction for someone who's just looking at an empty grid and has no idea what the fuck they're doing or where they're supposed to look. I feel like, especially because like Secret Satan brings out like, for a lot of people, myself included, like this sort of like ambitious enthusiasm towards like crazy rule sets or things that you wouldn't normally set. So like seeing like a JSUM's portal puzzle, like no, just trying to figure out what is restricted, and even just like looking there in the first place as opposed to looking somewhere else, is going to add a star of difficulty no matter what.
It's an interesting way to think about it.
So I'd say I'm more sadistic outside of Secret Satan, because I'm just crafting stuff for my own enjoyment.
I was going to ask is there a commonality between 4-star deductions and 5-star deductions? Like, can you quickly summarize how do you categorize these things?
Well, some advice that K&T gave me a while back is to make sure that like any deduction that you have, that you can like easily summarize it in a sentence or two. And that's like a deduction. And you may need to have like multiple deductions in order to make like serious progress, but you still need to be able to break it down. And I think writing solve guides helps, and I've been meaning to do more of that. The problem with me is just that I'm like too neurotic to do that all the time. So I just do that for like my harder puzzles that I care more about. But
So,
I'd say the biggest
yeah.
difference between 4-star and 5-star puzzles is that 5-star puzzles are often a little bit more about like understanding mechanisms of things, or at least like my favorite 5-star puzzles are like stuff like um Philomeno 77, I think it's called. I think that's the number. By Mixo. And then uh Tesseralis has like this Major Look Sudoku hybrid that's just like absolutely fascinating. And they both kind of start with like this very alien idea, and then you realize how it works. Meanwhile, I think 4-star puzzles are a little bit closer, or more commonly more along the lines of here's a mechanism, here's how it works, figure out the implication of that.
Right. Interesting. I was going to ask, when you're using paper and pencil to set or make notes about setting, are you usually writing out deductions, or are you literally writing out like the grid or drawing things about the grid?
It's usually the grid. I'm not actually like like I said, I'm too neurotic to be like a words person and write down the words for every deduction that I put in a puzzle. But I'm trying to do better about that, because I think it generally helps me make puzzles that are cleaner. But it just like helps them stick in my head more. But it's very much like grid, and just like being able to visualize and like erase things and draw them in more easily, and like letter stuff. And honestly, I find that Penpa is really, really good too for that sort of like, if you are interested in like having the freedom to notate things. Like when I'm solving puzzles in Penpa, I will use the cage tool to draw killer cages in for JSOM's puzzles. And that helps me sometimes.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because it's like a visual reminder of what logic I'm looking for.
What setters do you feel your style is most similar to?
Oh, that's a good question. I know like my friends I'm probably the most similar to, just because like I talk to them and solve more of their puzzles. Like Doomdia, I solve like more than half of his puzzles, which is more than I can say for most people. I'm probably similar to like Faluda in a sense of like sometimes I make really hard puzzles, and I'm also just like very creative with my rule sets. But like to actually compare myself to either of those, I can't do it. I don't see myself as at their level yet.
Okay. So humble.
I see myself at like my own level in terms of like being like them. I don't feel like I'm super like them. I feel like I'm kind of like in my own place at the side. I'm not necessarily saying they're better than me. Like
Okay.
I don't want to like put them on a pedestal, but like I'm very much doing my own thing.
Right.
And it's especially hard because like things that I'm really into, like the aforementioned battleship puzzles, and then also like Akari RGBs, I don't see too many people setting with them.
Right.
So hard for me to compare myself in that aspect either.
What's a genre that you wish people would set with more often?
Akari RGB. It's
Yeah.
it's very interesting. I have seen some really cool stuff done with it. Like there was someone made a secret Santa gift on the CTC server for, I think it was Bookworm, and it was like JSOMs with Akari RGB, and the way that the two things interacted was just like really interesting.
So like the color was the JSON color as well?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I need to check that out after. That's a great idea.
Mhm.
Uh, I want to ask about classic Sudoku. So we'll transition into that with DoomDX question about what's your favorite classic Sudoku technique to use when setting non-Sudoku puzzles?
This is a really good question because there are, like, I've gotten this feedback a lot that in my other puzzles that are not even Sudoku puzzles, there are things that feel like classic Sudoku techniques. I feel like the most like specific answer I could give would be Otagons, specifically in Akari RGB, because in Akari RGB there's like this concept where like if you're on a rectangular grid, then every cell can see a maximum of 2 colors. So if you string together like a bunch of clues that are like RGs and they all see each other, if the RGs are all like sharing the same row or column, then they're all getting the same color from their rows and the same color from their columns. So you can have an Otagon of size 1 in Akari RGB if you place a light that's seeing 2 clues that are of the same type, but it's like looking up at one and left at another. And I feel like that makes Otagons in general more intuitive compared to in classic Sudoku, where you're rarely going to see them any smaller than like size 5.
Right. Do you think that a lot of classic Sudoku concepts are hard to grasp because we're usually using 9x9 Sudoku and there's 9 options per cell, and that makes it a little bit...
I think they're hard to grasp because Sudoku itself involves 9 different numbers.
Right.
Like if you look at Akari RGB, that's basically 3 colors and then you're just combining them in different ways. I would say something more general that applies to like a lot of my puzzles is like this idea of here are 2 states or here are 3 possible states, but what do you have in common with them? And I feel like a lot of the more like handcrafted Sudokus that aren't just like finding weird chains are usually on some level about understanding that there are different possibilities, but all of those possibilities are going to result in something being the same or something else breaking.
Yeah. So,
and I definitely put that in a lot of my puzzles, regardless of whether they're Sudoku puzzles or something else.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Canty said that's his favorite kind of bifurcation, is when all possibilities are the same. So a classic Sudoku, do you think that setting classic Sudoku is closer to setting variant Sudoku or closer to setting pencil puzzles?
It's like setting a yupan where you have absolutely no fucking control over anything. Sorry for my language. I don't know if this is a family-friendly stream.
But, like vaguely, it depends on the interview, I guess. like
if you're setting a yupan puzzle, like you're basically like placing things in specific spots, whether they're like crosses or straight lines or corners, and you're just like placing them in the grid, and then they do fairly obvious things. Like a corner is going to add one spot to its corner column in one spot in its corner row for like the corner clues if there's a clue there, and then it's also going to block off, like it's going to create two branching lines and then prevent two other cells from having lines in there. Like it's fairly obvious what it's going to do. And meanwhile, with classic Sudoku, it's, again, you're working with 9 different numbers and you have to place them in a very specific way. But the reason why I say that they're similar is because they both involve like placing things and understanding and sort of like having to pack things. Like with classic Sudoku, it's very specific. You have to pack exactly one of each number into exactly every space. I'm also probably biased in a way because the first and yupan that I set was also a doppelblock puzzle, which also involves packing. I don't know if packing is a good word or if there's like another word for it, but just sort of like trying to make things fit.
Right.
I guess is what I'm getting at. And plus, like, you can also have like things like X-wings and swordfishes in, I mean, you can have them in yupan as well, but you can also have them in like Akari. Like not even Akari RGB, just like classic Akari has like fishes. It's practically all fishes for some puzzles that you see on puzzling. It's just like fish and then another fish. But because there's only one of those, like in Akari, there's just one thing. It's like light bulb. It's a lot easier to see that fish, and it barely feels like, oh, I'm using this fancy solving technique. No, it's just you're just understanding the implications of what's right in front of your eyes.
Yeah, it almost feels less than it is in Sudoku because it's clearer to see, which in reality it shouldn't be less because it's just the same thing.
Yeah.
So on behalf of everyone else, what is yupan and like why?
Why? Well, it's basically a puzzle where you create a network of lines, which are tiles in the grid, and you're given like corner tiles and straight tiles, and then like T tiles, and then cross tiles. So it's just like the possible tiles that can be drawn using only lines that go from the center of one cell to the center of another cell orthogonally. And you're given clues as far as how many tiles go in each row and column, basically. So like one column may have to have 3 T's, but then there are some rows that can't have any T's, and then other rows that have to have a bunch of straight lines. And so it leads to some really interesting like deductions. It's a very, as far as the why goes, it's a very unique like kind of thing because it's object placement, but with like these sort of like connections that are more that you'd see more in a loop puzzle. But it's not a loop puzzle. It's very much object placement. And it's very much you see sort of like the same kinds of like short chains and like geometric, like visualizing the grid and understanding the implications of where certain things go that you see in like a classic Sudoku or some other puzzle types that are very heavy on placing things and making them fit.
Okay. That's a good answer.
At least that's why I like it.
That might help in softening my objection to solving them because I've tried before and I don't understand.
They're not for for everyone. That's for sure.
I think
I know people who really struggle with them, and I'm just like, I get it.
I think I was thinking of them too much as a loop puzzle and not as much of a placement puzzle. So maybe I need to come
Yeah.
back to them again. Uh, what's the most wisty puzzle that you've made? Like what puzzle encapsulates you?
I mean, it has to be set piece. The whole reason why I set piece was because I received some very, helpful advice. I was having a really rough day, and micro study said something to me along the lines of like, be unreasonable. That's what makes you alive. And I actually put it as like that's the text that pops up when you solve the puzzle on either Penpa or Sudoku Pad. And I was just like, how can I make a puzzle that is like the kind of puzzle that I am inclined to make, but usually don't because it seems like a little bit too much of a stretch. And I'd had this grid sitting around for a while, and the grid, and I had the break-in idea for the grid involving like the four four central regions and something that happens with them, but I couldn't make that break-in work in any sort of reasonable sense. So I was like, what if I just allow repeat digits, but have like this set and make it so that basically every deduction in the puzzle for the first, like, at least the first 2/3 of the puzzle, you can describe almost every deduction as a set deduction, not in terms of just like set equivalence theory, like, oh, I'm making these colors, but in the more literal sense of like, you are working with a specific set of numbers and you have to think about that set of numbers and how to make them fit into the geometry of the grid. And that's very much when I am making variant Sudoku, that's probably what I find the most interesting because it really helps me like just sort of express my puzzle making ideas.
Cool. Someone had mentioned in the chat that they love your thumbnails, and I love them too. They're great. Why go out of your way to make these very interesting looking grids that are a little bit like glossed up from the original, I guess.
As for why I do it, it's the same reason that I do everything else I do, which is just because I'm extra.
Okay.
Like, I remember in high school, I was not in photography class or videography class, but I would hang out in those classes because I'd have study halls and my friends would be in them, and I'd just like go on the computer and learn Photoshop on my own. And I've just gotten fairly good at it. And it's my way of being artsy, even though I can't actually draw, because I can't draw for shit. But I'm a visual person, so I like being able to express myself visually, and it's just a fun little thing to do to my puzzles to just sort of like give them the sort of character that I envision them having, and just like show people like, see, this is what the puzzle feels like for me.
That's really cool. Have you ever
Thank you.
like delayed publishing something because you couldn't envision what the thumbnail should look like?
That's a good question. I don't think I've done that.
Do you always just like know exactly what you're gonna do?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do either. I just kind of open up Photoshop and wing it half the time. And then the other half of the time, like set piece, it's already a very interesting looking thing. So I just kind of like make it shine with like, oh, some bloom and some highlights and then maybe a little bit of a background image or something.
Do you think
I try to be subtle about it because there's this one LMD user. I think their name is Jessica. They commented on one of my puzzles asking like why basically a similar question of like, why do you do this? I would prefer, but they said I would prefer having the blank slate. as opposed to the artsy one because it's easier for me to sort of like draw in. And I just replied to them. I'm just like, you can just open up the Penpa link. Like, I provide Penpa links for all my puzzles, so you can just open up the Penpa link and there's the blank grid there, and then you can just screenshot it. So, but they haven't gotten back to me since then. So hopefully they took my advice. And Jessica, if you are watching this, hi, I appreciate your comments on my puzzles, and I'm sorry if the artsiness is too much for you. I can't stop myself. I tried, I couldn't.
You should dedicate a puzzle to Jessica and just make it a blank grid. Or, on the other hand, make it incredibly, like, not even related to the puzzle, just a picture of, like, a tiger or something.
That's a great idea.
Daniel Silverstone had asked if you were told you had to create a puzzle called Floribunda, which constraint would you reach for first and why?
Okay, what's the title? Floribunda?
I put it in the chat. Floribunda. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right. I don't know.
Floribunda. Yeah, that's like it's a type of flower. It's not wisteria. It's like they're kind of like roses, I think.
Okay, I thought it was a dunk on Florida. So
maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe you're right and I'm wrong. But I'm gonna go with that, and I'm gonna say Renban because they're like sort of like pink purple, and then indexing because I was not given enough time to think about this question. So indexing because that's something I can reach for quick.
Cool. It's like a choose your weapon situation or something.
I have a question for Daniel. Is there a puzzle named Floribunda? Has anyone taken you up on this offer yet? Because if not, I will.
I don't know. If Daniel's in the chat, he can let us know. What's your biggest puzzling regret?
Ooh, my biggest puzzling regret. The first time I posted my first Clockwork Yagellin puzzle, it had been thoroughly tested, and there was an issue with the rule set entirely. The way I had worded the rule about the gears, because in the first puzzle, 2 of the gears are touching, and the way I had worded it made it so that it had no solutions instead of one solution. And it was not spotted until after it was published and K&T noticed it. And since then, I don't think K&T has solved another one of those puzzles. So I apologize. I apologize profusely, and I'm also apologizing now to anyone else in chat who may have been confused by the wording on that very first puzzle that I published before I fixed the wording. I also, for all the future puzzles, I just didn't let gears touch for the sole fact that I was just too scared to mess it up again.
This part that's like from a cell not touching that gear to a cell touching that gear.
Through. So see, if none of the gears touch each other, it's a very straightforward rule. If none of the gears touch each other, the rule is literally just, for every time the loop touches one of the 4 cells around a gear, then it's counted as visiting that gear, and it has to alternate inside-outside every time it visits a gear.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a cell that's touching multiple gears, then things get all fucky.
Yeah, when I was trying to solve this for the backdrop, I was like, that was the part that was tripping me up. I'm like, how does it work with touching the gears part? I'm just gonna hopefully not have to do that, and then I didn't have to do that to make the backdrop image, and I still don't know how to do that. So
yeah, my advice to anyone who's interested in solving that series is that you can just start with the second puzzle in the series if you don't like it, because second puzzle it's also a 2-star. It's just kind of a better puzzle.
Poor orientation. Um, how
I
do you?
like the
Yeah,
puzzle. It's just wording the rules and making it intuitive was not. Those were two separate tasks.
yeah. Uh, how do you overcome creative blocks when designing puzzles?
I don't. I just go months without setting. I don't set a puzzle unless I like if I I mean I have that. See, the thing is, I have made 4 Secret Satan puzzles now, and the thing is, because for Secret Satan, like you are given like a specific person to make a puzzle for. So if I'm having trouble setting a puzzle for someone, I can just solve one of their puzzles
Yeah,
and then see if I get ideas from that. So if I'm just solving on my own time just for fun and I'm not doing that, then I feel no pressure to set if I'm having trouble. So I just don't. And I think that's pretty healthy too, because it gives me more time to focus on solving. And I'm not quite at FGM's persistent level of like, oh, you should solve 30 puzzles for every one that you've set. I remember he said something like that
yeah,
in his
something
interview,
like
but I
that. It might have
definitely
been a higher number
respect.
actually.
It might have been even higher, but I definitely respect him for that a lot. And I think in general, solving makes it better. I respect solving so much that I think that like people like Chameleon who give consistently give me really good constructive feedback on what works and what doesn't in a puzzle and make my puzzles better as testers. I think like they should be the ones with Patreons. Like imagine someone setting a Patreon up and being like, I will test your puzzle and give you critical feedback for it. Like I'm that appreciative of people who are solvers. Um and I'm not saying that as like a diss at anyone else who has Patreons. Like I'm a new Mr. Patreon member. I'm happy to support people in this community. I just I think solving holds like a specific place in my heart as like people who have helped me make my puzzles better, and I'm very grateful for them. So I'm always happy to be given the chance to do that for other people. And also I just like solving, and I think it's fun, and I think it's a bit harder work than setting for me at least. So it's more rewarding in the end.
Yeah. I just want to see someone set up a Patreon that's just that. But also I kind of want it to be like, I'll give all your puzzles on LMD 100% or something like that. Pay me to solve all your puzzles and give them good ratings. Like, uh, what do you hope solvers will get out of solving your puzzles?
um and a deeper understanding of whatever it is the puzzle is about. Like, not understanding necessarily in terms of like, oh, like I get, because my puzzles are very rarely the really fancy type I talked about earlier. Like, I don't make castle in the sky puzzles, but I make puzzles where like I want people to sort of gain intuition, and by the end of the puzzle, to have been able to look at the first couple steps of the puzzle and be like, oh yeah, that was this type of deduction, and that type of deduction is now in my brain a little bit more and comes to me faster.
Hmm.
And I have like an understanding of how to look for that or how to apply that and how to like think in this certain way. Like for set piece, it's all about sets. For Clockwork Yagellin, it's all about like inside versus outside. For Akari RGB, some of my puzzles are about like Autogons, and others are about like some other classic Sudoku type things. And what I most want people to get out of my puzzles is just like the reason why I made the puzzle, which is to sort of like communicate these ideas. But I'd say the second most thing is just, if not that, just enjoy it. Like I want people to have a good time.
Yeah.
I hope people have a good time. I'm assuming if people didn't have a good time with my puzzles, then I wouldn't be here. So I think I'm doing an okay job at that front.
Good job. Yeah, you're doing a great job. What would you say to? I guess I should preface this by Wisteria like sets pencil puzzles, like all kinds of pencil puzzles, classic Sudoku, variant Sudoku, hybrid, like crazy things like set piece. What would you say to people who like are just like standard variant Sudoku all the way, never have like touched anything else? Should they branch out or should they stay in their comfort zone? Like what makes you want to branch out so much?
I would say to pick up like Gap or something, like go back to Gap Volume 1 and just solve a bunch of those puzzles and like see which genres appeal to you and which ones don't. And maybe some of you are genuinely just variant Sudoku all the way and none of them will reach you. Like I know some people who are like that, but I think you should at least give it a try. And I don't say that because I don't like variant Sudoku, because I do. I like it a lot, and I've set plenty of variant Sudoku puzzles, and like I've probably set more variant Sudoku puzzles than I have like Akari RGBs even, and I've set a ton of Akari RGBs because variant Sudoku, the word variant is right in there. There's a lot of different possibilities, and I think it's a popular framework for a reason, because a lot of people find it a natural like way to sort of like understand their solving and their setting is by having this framework of 9 rows, 9 columns, 9 boxes, and 9 digits. But I think the world is a lot bigger than that, and um, I do think someone's missing out if they haven't at least given other things a try. Does that answer your question? I've already forgotten what the answer was or what the question was.
Yeah, I think that answers the question. Hopefully that gave them some inspiration to go try Gap. Uh, I should have asked this before when we were talking about orientation, but do you feel like you're good at writing the rules to your own puzzles?
Well, apparently not. I'd say generally speaking, yeah. That was a very problematic thing to begin with. Having the gears with like having a cell that touches multiple gears was just like complicated, and I should have thought it through clearer, but I didn't because I was excited to share the puzzle, and I figured that my testers would recognize if something was wrong, and then oops.
Happens.
But I like set piece, for example, like once I learned that the word multi-set was a thing, like I understood exactly how to write the rules for set piece, and it actually bothered me quite a bit that cracking the cryptic, see what happened was cracking the cryptic didn't just change the rule set for their puzzle. They somehow managed to change the rule set that was on my Sudoku pad link, and I didn't notice. So as a result, when someone was like went to solve set piece from like a Discord message I had posted in like CTC or Skunkworks or something, or on LMD even, they were given this Sudoku pad link, which CTC had somehow changed to have like their version of the rules, which wasn't as clean and was just kind of like a little bit more easy for laymen, arguably. Although I thought that the original rules were completely fine, and I'm not sure why they changed them to begin with. But whatever. I just eventually fixed it, realized it happened, and made up a new link.
That's very weird. I didn't know they did that, but I will keep an eye on that.
I mean, I don't. I shouldn't really complain about that because they featured it now. Like thousands of people have solved set piece instead of like 20. So I I can't complain really. Like that's why I'm very grateful that they featured it, and I'm humbled by the response from it because like it's just it's a very wild experience having something featured by CTC in the first place, let alone like having them feature it in a video that's like the most beautiful Sudoku in the world, and it's like one of your craziest puzzles you've ever made, and it's also the puzzle that you specifically made to be like the most out there you thing that you could think of. It's
That does sound
it was
validating.
encouraging, and I'm so yeah. I'm I I don't want to sound like I was complaining too much about that because
No.
at the end of the day, I'm happy.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a legitimate problem. Uh, is there any tips that you can give other setters on writing new rule sets in a clear form?
Definitely just have people look it over, and specifically, I'd say if you're making a new rule set, specifically ask for feedback from your testers on the rule set wording and make sure that it's clean.
Yeah, that's
Because some what I learned from that was that testers, even if they are unsure, they will think that because it's a new rule set that you're more apt than them to understand the wording.
hmm,
Because it wasn't that nobody who tested my puzzle had noticed the issue with the wording. It's that they assumed that they were misunderstanding something, not that I was misunderstanding something.
right.
And in general, I think it would be better if people were more willing to give constructive critical feedback like that, or even about other things like if a step in a puzzle doesn't feel clean or whatever.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
it's definitely there are times when like the people who've tested my puzzles have all kind of been like yes men, and then I post the puzzle and then there's like one step that is trickier than all the other steps.
Hmm. I guess
And
the
actually,
other,
that's a
yeah,
trend, especially in some of my older puzzles. It's funny. Because there's sort of like, there's a few schools of thought, but like the two schools of thought that I think are like the most popular is like one is where like, oh, you have a consistent difficulty through like the whole thing. And then the other sort of school of thought, which is the one I fall into a little bit more often, is that you sort of like start with something a little bit easier than the rest of the puzzle and then end with something a little bit harder than the rest of the puzzle. That way, you sort of like progress and like go, it's like more of like a difficulty progression in like, video game terms.
right. Uh, I guess the other thing that you don't see as much is someone just uh, trying it and then not giving any feedback and just giving up, or someone trying it and saying that they didn't like it so much without actually saying what they didn't like or what was the step that was
Yeah.
too hard or something. Like I find that even when I get critical feedback, it isn't constructive at all because I can't do anything with it. I don't know what's wrong. I just know something's wrong, so I have to go through and guess what's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, not fun. Feedback is a whole beast.
Yeah. In terms of like feedback, I remember my first like sort of like big 5-star puzzle was my battleship deconstruction puzzle. And like the first person who gave me, so first of all, my testers loved every bit of it, and I put it on LMD, and that was it. And like my testers loved it, so I put it on LMD. And I don't think my testers were lying about that. I think they genuinely enjoyed the puzzle. And then one person said that the ending was horrible and that they didn't like it. And that was kind of like all they told me. And then I was feeling really shitty about that for a while because that was my first time I had made like a 5-star puzzle that was like a big ambitious one that wasn't just like a variant Sudoku 9x9. But then Zeta solved it on stream, and he said something about the ending that was a lot more constructive, which was that, see, because it's a deconstruction puzzle, you have like this sort of like battleship logic for the first 2/3 of the puzzle. But then the last third of the puzzle is like this sort of irregular Sudoku style logic. And what Zeta told me was that the irregular logic was cool, it was clean, but that fans of the first 2/3 of the puzzle aren't necessarily going to be fans of the last third of the puzzle because they're two pretty different concepts.
Right.
And I think that's what led me to like sort of really start making my puzzles better in terms of like cohesiveness.
Hmm. So how would you remedy that? Like, do you put more Sudoku into the beginning? Do you make the Sudoku easier at the end? How do you go about solving that issue?
If I made the puzzle now, I would have just made the ending Sudoku really easy. And then I would have been annoyed because I actually think the ending Sudoku in that is pretty cool. I like deconstructions for that reason, but I would have begrudgingly just sort of went with the crowd because I understand the criticism that it's not as cohesive. So I would have just made it a shorter puzzle with less Sudoku at the end. But I will say that experience, there's a reason even I didn't put that as my biggest puzzling regret when you asked about puzzling regrets, because I think there was a really positive experience for me in getting those two very different criticisms and realizing that one was more effective than the other. And so that was a good experience. But I also think it was a positive experience for like the fact that I like saw something like that was part of why set piece exists, because I realized here's something that some people don't like, but here's something that I really like. So I should make something in the future that's for people who really like that thing.
Yeah.
And eventually I did.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't think about set piece in that kind of like with the irregular Sudoku kind of. Yeah, anyways. Microstudy asked, when can we expect a word search / set piece hybrid?
So first of all, he did not say word search, he said word search, because he's referring to X Duncan's word search Sudoku on LMD from 2020, of which I am the only solver. And if you see here, I have it up on my wall here. I have the solution to word search by X Duncan. It is...
Sorry, Micro. That's very good.
It is the most batshit puzzle I've ever solved. There are so many reasons why no one else has solved it on LMD. I could go on and on about all of the things that are wrong with that puzzle. But it was an intensely memorable experience for me to finally push through and solve it when it practically wasn't meant to be solved.
Right.
It's not my favorite puzzle, but it is probably the most memorable solving experience for me just because of how unintentionally convoluted it was.
I've seen that in your background before, like in intro video clips, and I've wondered what it was. So it's good to know. I forgot about that. I should have asked about that explicitly.
Yeah. It's just the rule set. The way the rule set is worded is ambiguous, and it has like a plot twist halfway through it. The word bank on there's on LMD, it has like a word bank, but then when you open it up in F Puzzles link, there's like an extra word added to the word bank, so you don't know which word bank to use. And if you use one of them, then like you can't use the break-in at all. So I really hope X Duncan reappears someday and explains to me what was going on with that puzzle, what their thought process was, because it is incredible. It's really funny. I don't want to spoil it, but it's really funny.
There are so many comments on this puzzle for having one solved.
Yeah, and LMD, there's I forget who it was, but I think it was like Prime Weasel was just like, I have no fucking clue what I'm supposed to do here.
Yeah, I haven't got the faintest idea of what I should be doing here, Duncan. Very confusing. That's a great comment. Yeah, I did that weird word search one on stream. But okay, but insane. Interesting.
Oh yeah, you did the word search. It's sort of like a crossword type thing. It's
Yeah.
like Sudoku at the end, but it's like Sudoku mixed with like a crossword where you have to like fit the words in the boxes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I forget who that's by, but that was a good puzzle. I liked that one.
I can probably find it like pretty easily. Oh, there it is. UF Digga.
Yeah, UF Digga. Yeah,
This
I
one.
liked that puzzle. That's a
Where
much
yeah.
less ridiculous word search puzzle. What was Micro Studies' question again? When can I expect a
set
word
piece.
speech?
Yeah.
I hate to disappoint you, but the answer to that is never, because I feel like word speech is like a relic of time. I don't think you could actually emulate the way that you have to think outside the box and like figure out what's going on without like a clue. Like you can't emulate the experience of solving that puzzle. And like Mixo and a couple other people know what I'm talking about, because like the first half of this puzzle, we were actually solving it in Skunkworks like together and trying to figure out like how the puzzle even worked. But then eventually it kept breaking, so everyone else went to bed except for like me and Xeon. And like Xeon just watched as I like figured out what you were supposed to do, and then getting the solution code. The solution code is a puzzle in of itself, because the solution code thing is written like so, it's worded so poorly, and there's like a mistake in there too, so you have to figure out what mistake Duncan made. And it's just like it's something that I found incredibly rewarding and very funny and very fun to do, but it's also not something that I would ever do again or would ever expect someone else to do for one of my puzzles.
Fair enough. That's a great answer. Playmaker had asked, what kinds of rule sets would you love to try setting even though you haven't tried so before?
I haven't set anything with aquarium yet, which I've solved like aquarium puzzles and found them really fun. Lately I've been solving like those like ice barn and ice lom puzzles. Like the ones that are like sloops but with like icy cells where you go straight through them, but you can like cross, the loop can cross at some point. And I've been enjoying that. And I think Agent had a really cool hybrid that was like an ice cave, I think he called it. Agent has so many like really interesting combinations of like two pencil puzzle genres, or like one pencil puzzle genre but with like some weird twist to it. I like Agent's puzzles. The question was, what was the question I was answering again?
What kinds of rule sets would you love to try setting even though you haven't tried so before?
Yeah, just sort of like more pencil puzzle hybrids, I guess. I've been meaning to like actually make a chart of like Gap genres that have been covered in Gap, and like which of those genres I'd be most interested in setting a puzzle with, and like what my general thoughts were on them.
Hmm.
Been meaning to do that.
What do you like most about Kuchaku? It's Starks in your ass.
Oh, I love Kochaku. It's a really fun genre. It's very visual, and it's a loop puzzle, but it's a very strange kind of loop puzzle where it's it's like all about connectivity. Like everything is about connectivity, and that's like what the genre is. But it definitely appeals to me because, as I've said before, I'm kind of like a visual person. Although I will say sometimes there are things that seem like they're right angles that aren't. So it is hard to. It's not something that you could solve on paper, I don't think, because and there isn't really a super good tool either, because on puzzling, like the only way, you just kind of have to like draw in the lines and then hit check and it'll tell you if they're a right angle or
Yes.
not, and it's kind of like someone should make a better interface for this. But it'll
Yeah.
also be kind of ridiculous to make a whole interface for one genre, and I think the only person who would do that is Wes. So
Yeah.
of course he asked that question.
Needs to learn coding to just do that.
He was actually learning coding and coding. I think he was coding a Kochaku solver though.
Oh, okay.
So I'd be curious. I'd be curious what will
Already
come of
have.
that, if anything comes of that.
Wonderful. Uh, what do you think about like the future of puzzles, like innovations like Kuchaku solvers and fog of war puzzles? Where are we going?
Um, I'd love to see more of the sort of like you were talking earlier about like Einstein puzzles and like stuff like Navario's like Battleship Sudoku thing that he made, where you're like actually incorporating like worded like statements of like clues into the solve path, as opposed to um just like being given a grid and or like lines in a grid or whatever, or numbers. I i feel like that has a lot of potential that's untapped, and I'm kind of bummed that my own attempt at I couldn't come up with something interesting, but I do feel like something interesting is there because I really enjoyed Navario's puzzle. And also I was actually solving some of those like classic logic puzzle, because I had a classic logic puzzle book that I was solving while I was in the mental hospital for a couple weeks last month. So it was that it was just something to pass the time, and I enjoyed doing that. Um as far as like the future of like solver support and whatnot, uh I'm optimistic that Sudoku Maker might get some good updates in the future. Sudoku Maker is really nice tool for like cosmetics and also for solver support for some things that Ranks hasn't gotten to yet.
Yeah.
ZZW is made a branch of Penpa that adds basically everything that I've ever wanted Penpa to have, and so much other stuff that I never even thought of that is nice for Penpa to have. And last time I checked, they were working on like integrating it into the main branch of Penpa instead of just having a separate branch.
Cool.
And that that is something I'm very much happy about and currently use when solving. And I'm looking forward to the future of whatever comes of that. So yeah.
Awesome. I should ask that question more often. I get to hear about so many new developments. uh, Do you find more enjoyment in solving or setting?
I feel like I said this earlier, where like solving is more rewarding, but it's also more work.
Mhm.
Um, I definitely find like the end of a hard puzzle solving a lot more rewarding. Than like solving Philomeno 77 was like just such a rewarding, exciting moment. And when I finished it, I was like, oh my God, that was great. I feel like so revitalized. But I feel like I sort of had to like use that energy towards like put that energy to good use towards setting stuff too, because I'm just naturally inclined to make stuff.
Mhm.
So it's definitely a both situation for me. I couldn't really do one without the other, I don't think.
Right. Uh, would you set puzzles even if no one would solve them?
Um, I mean, the answer to this question is yes, because I do, because some of my puzzles I haven't bothered to share with anyone. Like sometimes I just something that I have a habit of doing is just like whenever it comes to like variant Sudokus, like stuff like Renban, like making like a Renban German Whispers puzzle. Like there's a Renban German Whispers puzzle that I have bookmarked that I've had bookmarked in my browser for like 2 years, and every once in a while I just go to it and try to figure it out, and I can't because I don't. There probably isn't a clean way of seeing what's going on. Like it's probably just some chainy bullshit, but I just enjoy challenging myself every once in a while to do that because I did set the puzzle, and since I used a solver support, I know that stuff is forced.
Hmm.
Um, and then other times I'll do something similar where I just like throw some clues in a 159 grid and then solve it myself just because I felt like solving a 159 puzzle but didn't feel like seeking out something someone else made.
Where do you normally go to solve puzzles? Like, how do you seek them out?
Um, Usually I just either LMD or like I just go to my friends and solve my friends' puzzles because or like people who have solved my puzzles. Like Kristinet has solved like almost I think almost every single one of the Clockwork Yashon puzzles, if not all of them. Last time I checked, they hadn't solved the last one, but maybe they did by now. Um, uh, and so like that means, oh, I want to return that favor and like go check out some of their puzzles because they have some really cool puzzles. Then I've had them like on my LMD. I use like the LMD observe list as like a list of puzzles I want to solve. And right now it's like way too big because of course it is, because there's so many cool puzzles out there and not enough time of day between like work and my other hobbies.
For sure, yeah. I, I think that's probably what the observe list is for, and not to just like watch them. I'm not 100%
Yeah.
sure though.
Hmm.
Maybe there's something more sinister about the observe list that we don't know. uh, Talk us through the emotions that you feel when starting to set a puzzle, like when you're starting to figure some things out.
The emotions?
Yeah, like, do you feel optimistic or excited or like uh,
Hmm.
worried?
It's a good question. For me, I'd say it's probably a lot subtler emotions compared to like when I'm making music. Like when I'm making music, it is a very emotionally involved process.
Mhm.
Whereas with puzzles, I'm just kind of like thinking about things and being like, oh, huh, this is neat. Um, I was definitely a bit excited when I found that one set break in that I was talking about earlier, and then I was very disappointed when it kept breaking. But like both of those emotions were still like pretty tame emotions, which is actually something that is that might sound like a negative, but that's actually a huge positive for me. Like I have borderline, I have big emotions, so like having a hobby that is relatively like tame is extremely healthy for me.
That's great. Are there any specific puzzles that you've solved that have like had a massive impact on how you view puzzles or setting in general?
Definitely some of the puzzles that I have mentioned already. I'd say the biggest impact that I've had that puzzles have had on me has just been like solving like 3-star puzzles and 2-star puzzles and enjoying them a lot and being like, oh, I want to set more of this, because I'm naturally inclined to solve and set harder puzzles, but I'm still like routinely appreciative of the lesser difficulty ones. And especially when you have like a really, really interesting 3-star puzzle where it's not super hard to figure out where to look, but it's really interesting, the interactions that happen. Um, there's definitely still like so much of a world to be explored, like even in 9x9 variant Sudoku puzzle. But um, I definitely say I'm more inspired by like random stuff on puzzling or like aquarium puzzles that I solve. Um, another thing that inspires me a lot is just like the fact that like, so when I was like younger, when I was growing up, for my birthday every year, my dad would actually do like puzzle hunts
Oh,
for my
that's cool.
birthday. And like my like birthday gifts would be like things I'd find along like the puzzle hunt, and there'd be uh like clues. Like I remember like there was a clue like at the time my dad had like the on call on his car, where like you can say to the car like call dad, and it would call dad, or like, you know, call my sister, and it would call my sister. And like um I was given like an envelope that had a full house of cards, and I was told to like call the dad, and it turned out that we had to ask the car to call Bob Saget, because he plays the dad on Full House, the TV show, because it was a full house of cards. And that moment just stuck with me as just like, that was probably like the first moment in my life where like that I was presented with something that was challenging and I had to figure it out on my own. And now it wasn't like completely out of nowhere. Like me and my friends had like this like weird in joke about Bob Saget. So like that was where my dad got the idea from. Like he'd heard it from us, like having like this weird in joke. So like when we were tasked with, you know, when we were given this full house of cards, like it was less of a logical leap than it sounds completely out of context, but that was like just like this aha moment for me of like, oh my god, that's so clever and so funny. And I think that like the humor in that situation has definitely stuck with me. Like I like puzzles that I find funny.
Right. That's a good question. Was Bob Saget on the other end of the call?
No, he was not, unfortunately.
That's very disappointing.
But someone was, and that person did that person did give us the next clue. God, those puzzle huts were insane.
So let's talk about humor in puzzles then. What does humor in puzzles mean to you?
I just mean like what it says on the tin. Like I have this puzzle Nexus, and if anyone here hasn't solved Nexus, if you go to Nexus and solve like the first 10 minutes of it, you will know what I'm talking about. There's a very funny moment in Nexus. But aside from that, obviously like word search was very funny for me, from like the fact it's not called word search, it's called word search, to like the fact that like it's this esoteric thing from 2020, and no one's heard from the author, and no one knows what the hell it is. To just some other things, like I really enjoy Zeta Math's streams because like Zeta has like a really funny way of like solving puzzles and interacting with his chat. Like he's not just a good solver, he's also just like a really good entertainer, and I really respect that. And just the interactions he has with his chat are always just very entertaining and fun to watch. And like I said, I got into this hobby more because of like him and Bremster than I did CTC. And like before I got onto Bremster's channel and like saw the puzzles that I could actually solve, like I spent a good number of months just like watching and lurking on data math and just like participating in that. And that definitely sort of like influenced me as a setter and as a solver. And I definitely enjoy like group solves, like hanging out in Skunkworks and being a part of like the streams there that like Mixo and FJM do, because it's just a positive like social experience and it's very rewarding. Also, Isaiah was recently going through like every Xeon puzzle, and I don't know if he ever finished. He made it like 80% of the way through or something, and that was also really funny because like Xeon was there, and like some of Xeon's older puzzles are like not necessarily the cleanest puzzles in existence. Like they were helped by solver support, and sometimes it shows, and then other
Oh, wow.
times there were just like really big ideas that weren't necessarily executed in the cleanest way. So like the grid is kind of messy. He has a couple of puzzles where there's like a clue in every single cell, and it like looks like a traffic jam. It's horrifying, but it was just really funny to just like hang out with Isaiah and Xeon and like be a part of these solves where we're solving like just like these weird parts of Xeon's history. His puzzles are really great, especially his more recent ones. I have a puzzle with him. He's actually one of the only, if not, yeah, one of the only people that I've collaborated with. And we actually made a thermo puzzles that's like a thermo shivers hybrid. But when it first came out, it wasn't called a thermo shivers hybrid because the concept of shivers came from that puzzle.
Hmm. So, what have you learned from collaborating from the few collaborations you've done?
um, it's just been a really smooth and fun process. I definitely feel less nervous about my puzzles or like concerned with how they'd be received when I was making them with another person, because like who cares, like you're already having like that social element sort of satisfied by making something with someone else.
Mhm.
um I'd like to do it more often, but I also just am kind of a bit of a hermit sometimes. As I previously mentioned, I kind of have mental health issues, and sometimes like being on a Discord server is already like too much for me sometimes, which sucks, but I kind of live with it.
That's
I'm
fair.
so grateful for Riff Clown. He like him and everyone at Skunkworks, but him especially. He's just been so encouraging to me throughout like the past few years since I first got into this hobby. Riff Clown is a really great guy, and he's always so encouraging to me when I need space and when I don't need space and want someone to talk to, and when I'm he just puts up with me like leaving and rejoining his server every once in a while.
Yeah, Riff's a good guy. Uh, we should do the rapid fire questions before I forget. Uh,
Oh yeah,
so one answer the other as fast as you can. High lowity or odd evenity.
odd evenity,
Local or global deductions.
global,
Coloring or good living.
coloring,
Simple or complex.
complex,
Favorite digit to dance to.
8.
I thought you were frozen for a second. Geometry, arithmetic.
Oh, that one's really hard.
Yeah, I know.
Um, geometry, for the fact that that word can apply to more genres than arithmetic can,
True.
but solely because of that reason.
Penpa, F puzzle, Sudoku Maker, or something else.
Oh, Penpa, 100%.
Sudoku or pencil puzzles.
Pencil puzzles, 100%.
Chaos or order.
Chaos,
Big or little.
little.
Digital or analog.
Digital,
Cages or lines.
lines,
Arrows or dots.
arrows,
Indexers or chess constraints.
indexing. Wait, no. Chess. Wait, no. Indexing. Yeah, indexing.
Shading or loop puzzles.
Ooh. Why not both? That's my answer. Why not both?
Okay.
I
should win.
object to this question.
To disambiguate a given or an extra rule.
I want to say given because I like given more aesthetically, but realistically, I have to say extra rule because I'm very guilty of that.
Outside or inside clues.
Outside.
Cheese or bread.
Cheese.
Good or evil.
Evil.
Lawful or chaotic.
Chaotic.
Excellent. Okay. And then Microstudy asks, Wisteria Fall or Wisteria Falls?
Oh god, it's Wisteria Fall. But for whatever reason, on Cracking the Cryptic videos twice now, they put Wisteria Falls.
That's hilarious.
I think it's also spelled Wisteria Falls on one of the packs that I've contributed to. I think it was one of the killer packs. I don't care though. Although actually, there is a band that cropped up. There's a band from Australia that cropped up around like 2023 that's called Wisteria Falls, and I found them by accident when I was like trying to get to my own YouTube page.
That's hilarious.
And I like posted a comment on them like being like, OMG, a band with my name, and like I love this music. You guys are cool. But the comment got deleted, and I'm unsure whether the YouTube algorithm just like marked it as spam or whether, because that's a thing that happens, or whether it was actually like deleted by them because they didn't like me. And I'm too nervous to post again because I don't want to bother them.
I'm guessing it was deleted by YouTube because YouTube just deletes everything. But
yeah,
that's just. But maybe they particularly didn't like that. But I don't know. Where did the name Wisteria Fall come from?
So Wisteria is just like the name that I use, like even with like my friends and stuff online. And most of my friends are online because that's just how my social life works. But it's a flower, and I really like flowers, and I always wanted to name myself after a flower, so I did that. Although that's not like the name I use like IRL, like at work and stuff, which I don't know why. The separation is just nice. But Fall, I named myself after Isabel Fall, who was a writer who wrote a short story about so she wrote a short story called I forget whether it was called like I Am an Attack Helicopter or I Identify as an Attack Helicopter. And it was basically taking the sort of meme of like because there's like a meme that has unfortunately been adopted by a lot of transphobic people about like, oh, well, if you're a woman, then I'm an attack helicopter. And so she thought it would be funny if she wrote a short story which was literally about like the US military turning people into helicopters. And it was sort of a commentary on like the military police state and how it interferes with like society. And it was also a commentary on like how womanhood is often like weaponized. And it was a very interesting short story. But the thing is, a lot of people did not like it. And because there wasn't a lot of information available about the author, some people took it in bad faith and just kind of like just thought it was, you know, like problematic or like offensive. And um I am in a kind of similar position. I was a music writer and now I am not. And unfortunately, I part of why is because, you know, people deemed me like problematic or offensive when really I was just, you know, standing up for social issues in my own way and like believing in what I believe in. And so Isabel Fall, I don't know her, but I definitely feel like we have this shared experience of being hated by the internet and just kind of like pushed away from things that we cared about in the writing space.
Well, sorry to hear about that trouble, but that's very
No,
interesting.
no, it's
Origin of the name.
I'm sorry if I seem like
No.
glum or emotional about it, but I mean I chose the name for a reason, and it's also like I find it empowering that
Yeah.
I use that name because like I think it's admirable to be open about like things that you believe in and how you feel and being able to write freely. And yeah, it's just a name that means a lot to me.
Yeah, microstudy says it. Hell yeah. Let's go. Da, da, da. What's a question that you want to be asked, and what's your answer to that question?
Oh man, I feel like you actually kind of like answered it, like most of these questions were really good. Hmm. I guess you didn't ask me as much about like my solving career as much as my setting, which
Oh
makes
yeah.
sense because this is a setter spotlight. But like, I don't know. I'm I feel like it might be enlightening to talk a little bit about my experience solving like Castle in the Sky or like Philomeno 77 or like the crazy Neuromaze crossing Slitherlink that Mixo made. In general, just like those are some of the hardest puzzles that I've solved. And
Yeah, you have a
uh,
Hall of Fame actually on your LMD, which I was gonna ask you about.
yes, yeah, my Hall of Fame is just kind of like some of my favorite puzzles, specifically some of my favorites of the harder ones, and then my actual favorites list on LMD is like a bit longer. I keep it to 2 pages or less, but it's still about like 35 to 40 puzzles, I think, because I think each page on LMD has like 20 puzzles on it for your favorites list. So it's quite a bit. But yeah, so I'd say like something that really stands out to me from like since you didn't ask like a specific question, I'm just gonna kind of like pretend that this is answering some question. I don't know what question this would answer, but something that really stands out to me is something I mentioned earlier about like the puzzle language, and I think that there are a lot of commonalities between puzzles, even in like completely different genres. And something that really stood out to me, particularly when solving Castle in the Sky, there are concepts like parity and minimizing and maximizing and high-low-ity, as you said earlier in the rapid fire questions. And there are just like these concepts that you gain a deeper understanding from and also get to like know when to look for in puzzles that you get from solving more and more puzzles. And I really don't feel like any of the puzzles on my Hall of Fame list are like out of the range of the average solver to solve. I just think you need to like put in time and also like just like practice just like solving easier puzzles first and getting a understanding of when to look for parody and what exactly parody is and what the implications of it are. Especially in loop puzzles. Like, loop parody is something that I explore in Clockwork Yagellon a lot. And it's like I remember Belsita is a really strong solver, and she like didn't completely get it at first, but then like she did, and once it clicked with her, she was able to solve like the whole series. I'm pretty sure she solved the whole series at this point.
Yeah, right. Except for word Siege, of course. Everything doesn't apply to that one.
Except for Word Siege. Yeah, Word Siege is number 0 on my Hall of Fame list for that reason. It is not a part of my regular Hall of Fame list.
Yeah, but that's really cool that you have this little Hall of Fame distinct from the favorite puzzles list. It's 2 hours from the original start time, but we'll go another 5 minutes because we were a little bit late starting.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally fine with me.
Just in case you needed to leave. So do you said that you try to keep the favorites list to like 2 pages. Do you like delete puzzles from here if they are not making the cut or something?
Yeah, if my favorites list gets above 2 pages, I just sort of try and trim it down, which is hard to do because it's the same thing with music. I tend to like everything. Like,
Right.
even the things that, like there are some people who are like, oh, I listen to anything except for country or rap. And I'm like, hell no, like throw some country music at me, throw some rap at me. I will listen to whatever. And it's the same with puzzles. Like, when I solve a puzzle or when I like see a puzzle be solved, like most of the time I really appreciate it.
Right.
So my favorites list is more of like just something that I try to curate in case there are people interested in seeing it. If that makes sense. Like, if I had an actual favorites list, it would be like half the puzzles I've ever solved.
Right.
But I really want to have it for the same reason I have the Hall of Fame list, which is an even shorter version of that, just because, if someone's random stumbles onto my LMD puzzle and like checks out my profile and they want to know what kind of puzzles I like, they're like, oh, I want more of this. Like, not everyone is on Discord. Not everyone is going to be watching this interview, but I like those puzzles are just sort of like just a piece of me and like what I really, really enjoy. There's like a user on LMD named Marsh who solves one of my puzzles every once in a while. And actually, the first time that I saw them comment on one of my puzzles, I went to their profile and they only had like solved like 10 puzzles, and they tackled like this crazy 5-star puzzle of mine. And I was like, holy shit, that's awesome. Like, I wish I knew this person, but like, to my knowledge, they aren't on Discord. I have like my Discord like posted on LMD, and I've posted my email there before for people who don't have Discord. But there are people who just use LMD, and to my knowledge, they aren't really like a part of the community. And I think that I want my LMD page to be like a really like nice place for them too.
Right. Yeah. Hit my mic. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I had the same reaction as Micro when I saw my name on there. Mom, I'm on the screen. What else should we talk about for the next 2 minutes? We don't have very much time, so
Microstudy says we should talk more about Word Siege because only one puzzle got printed out and posted on my wall.
that's true.
Besides a poster of One Shot, I do have other posters on my wall. So I'm gonna hijack Microstudy's comment. Yeah, so over here we've got my Squishmallows and plushies and stuff. I've got one of those Jamaican bananas you get at the fair. I've got a One Shot poster. I've got my poster of Word Siege. I've got a poster of One, which is a really cool animated YouTube series that's not too long of a watch, but it's really interesting and really pretty and pretty funny, and it's just a good story. And then I've got like weird Tuhu thing that came with an album that I bought one time. And then I've got like a messy table, and above that I've got a Between the Buried and Me poster that I got at a concert. I saw Between the Buried and Me and The Deer Hunter, and that was a great concert. Highly recommend both those bands.
Cool. What kind of music do you make? Like, is there a specific genre you would say you're in?
I'd say I definitely tend to lean towards electronic music, but I make a bit of everything. Like, I definitely have some songs that are more metal. I have some songs that are more like laid back, like ballads. I have a lot of piano stuff because I play piano and I play MIDI keyboard, so a lot of synths as well. But some stuff with vocals, some stuff with instrumental. Right now, I'm actually working on an album that uses synth V, which is kind of like a fancy English Vocaloid that's like programmed like to the max. Like they even use like AI algorithms to sort of like enhance the recordings of the vocalists that they used, so that you can actually get multiple. It's not like a core part of the program. Like it's still you're still programming it very much like you would a Vocaloid. It's not like you're singing into the mic and it's doing AI transformations or anything like that. It's still a Vocaloid, but it's they use AI so that you can actually like generate like slightly different takes. If you like say you don't like how like a certain thing is transitioning, you can get a couple different takes and see if you like any of those takes more.
That sounds pretty cool.
And I thought that was really cool. So I've been learning the ins and outs of that, and I'm probably going to be making an album of that at some point. But I mean, I linked my Bandcamp earlier. You can check that out if you're curious what kind of music I make, because like I said, it is kind of a bit of everything. A lot of what's on my Bandcamp right now is like loops. Like I tend to gravitate towards like making loops that could be like used in the background of something. And that's just comes from my own personal habits of listening to songs on loop a lot.
And I also put your Bandcamp in the description, so check that out,
Thanks.
guys. All right, it is 3:06 for me, so that brings us to 2 hours. Thank you so much, Wisteria. This was great.
Thank you. This was awesome.
And can you announce the next person who's coming up? I don't think I told you specifically, but it was in the Patreon supporters chat.
Oh, yes. The next person who's going to be interviewed is Rice.
Woohoo, that should be fun. I think
I'm looking forward to that.
A week or 2 weeks around there ish. Not too long of a gap, so look out for that announcement. Ranks. Yes. Thank you everyone for coming out, and have a wonderful rest of the week. And thank you again, Wisteria.
Thank you everyone who watched. Hope you had fun. This was very fun.
Bye.
Bye.